Chapter 33. Hope to have your company at the bridge, writes Benjamin Chew to the surveyors. He means Mary Janviers at Christiana Bridge, where the line commissioners find merry pretext to gather, gossip, swap quids and quos, play whist, drink Madeira, sing catches, sleep late, or else stay up till the northbound mail coach wheels in at 7 a.m. and the passengers all come piling out for breakfast at the Indian Queen. Never know whom you'll run into. An hour's pause in the journey, wherein early risers may practice each day upon a different set of travellers. Flirting, cards, coffee and chatter. The hope is for a productive, when not amusing, hour. At this pleasant waterside resort, gulls sit as if permanently upon posts. Ducks enjoy respite from the attention of fowlers. The mild haze thins and thickens. Sandwiches and ale arrive in a relaxed and contingent way. Official business is taken care of quickly to make available more time for drink, smoke, and jollification. Yet whilst the Marylanders, attuned to leisure, take the time as it comes, the gentlemen from Philadelphia, their watches either striking together with eerie precision every quarter hour, or, when silent, forever being consulted and re-pocketed, must examine for productivity each of their waking moments, as closely as some do their consciences, unable quite to leave behind them the species of time peculiar to that city, best expressed in the almanacal sayings of Dr. Franklin. In the summer, toward evening, thunder gusts come slashing down off the Allegheny front, all the way riding close above the trees flaring either side in wet and bright waves upon each arrival of the lightning. Over Juniata, then Susquehanna, tapping at the windows of Harris's Ferry, skidding across the shake roofs of Lancaster and soaking the town, and on to Chesapeake and 1,000 tributaries, each in their humid, stippled turmoil, and the inn, and the gentlemen indoors at their merriment, whilst ducks of all sorts, lounging in the weather as if 'twere sunshine, fly into a frenzy at each blast of lightning and thunder, then, immediately forgetting, settle back into their pluvial comforts. Though all are welcome here, Janviers, like certain counterparts in Philadelphia, has ever provided a venue for the exercise of proprietarian politics by a curious assortment of city Anglicans and Presbyterians, with renegade Germans or Quakers appearing from time to time. Especially upon nights before and after voting, the rooms contain a great ridotto of hopeful cupidity. Strangers are viewed suspiciously. Mr. Franklin's confusion is toasted more than once. Rumours circulate that the anti-proprietarians have a Jesuit device for seeing and hearing through walls. The bar seems to vanish in the distance, hewn from some gigantic tropical tree of a vivid deep brown wood all through, further carved and waxed to an arm-pleasing smoothness, comfortable as a bed. No one has yet counted how many it can accommodate, though some have sworn to over 100. Environed by immoderately coloured colonial wallpaper, tropical blooms with vermilion petals and long, writhing stamens and pistils of indigo against a field of duck green, not to mention reliable magenta, the pulse of the province ever reciprocates, a quid for a quo, a round for a round, and ever another chance to win back the bundle one has wagered away. And somewhere sure, the raising of voices in debate political. Observe no further than the walls of London. A harsh winter, a cold spring, a dry summer, and no king. Not Boston, sir, but London, your precious Teutonical dispensation, damn, means even less upon these shores, sir. I would say the devil take it, were he not already quite in possession. Treason, sir. Mr. Dixon cordially, now then, sir. Peace, astrologer. Astronomer, if it please you, corrects Mr. Mason without quite considering. At least I am about my business in the honest light of God's day. What is to be said of men who so regularly find themselves abroad at midnight? The pious gentleman has worked himself into a state of heedless anger. Is it the innocent roasted berry that has put them all in such surly humour? No one else in the room is paying much notice, being each preoccupied by his own no less compelling drama. Smoke from their bright pale pipes hangs like indoor fog, through which, a glimmering, the heavy crockery and silverware claps and rings. Servant lads in constant motion carry up from the cellar coffee sacks upon their shoulders, or crank the handles of gigantic coffee grinders as the assembly clamours for cup after cup of the invigorating liquid. By the end of each day, finely divided coffee dust will have found its way by the poundful up the nostrils and into the brains of these by then alert youths, lending a feverish edge to all they speak and do. Conversing about politics under such a stimulus would have proved animated enough, without reckoning in as well the effects of drink, tobacco, whose smoke one inhales here willy-nilly with every breath, and sugar, to be found at every hand in lucent brown cones, great and little, iced cupcakes by the platterful, all manner of punches and flips, pies of the locality, crullers, muffins and custards. No table that does not hold some sweet memento for those it matters to, of the cane thickets, the chains, the cruel sugar islands. A sweetness of immorality and corruption, pronounces a Quaker gentleman of Philadelphia, bought as it is with the lives of African slaves, untallied black lives broken upon the greedy engines of the Barbados. Sir, we wish no one ill. We are middling folk. Our toil is as great as anyone's, and some days it helps to have a lick of molasses to look forward to at the end of it. If we may refuse to write upon stamped paper, and for the tea of the East India Company find a tolerable succedaneum in New Jersey red root, might philosophy not as well discover some patriotic alternative to these vile crystals that eat into our souls as horribly as into our teeth. Every day the room for hours together sways at the verge of riot. May unchecked consumption of all these modern substances at the same time, a habit without historical precedent, upon these shores be creating a new sort of European, less respectful of the forms that have previously held society together, more apt to speak his mind, or hers, upon any topic he chooses, and to defend his position as violently as need be. Two youths of the macaronic profession are indeed greatly preoccupied upon the boards of the floor in seeking to kick and pummel each into the other some enlightenment regarding the topic of virtual representation. An individual in expensive attire, impersonating a gentleman, stands upon a table freely urging sodomitical offences against the body of the sovereign, being chaired on by a circle of mechanics who are not reluctant with their own suggestions. Wenches emerge from scullery dimnesses to seat themselves at the tables of disputants, and in brogues thick as oatmeal recite their own lists of British sins. The attempt to relieve Fort Pitt continues, as do reverberations from the massacres at Conestoga and Lancaster. All the west is a surge and a flame. Wagons from over Susquehanna appear at all hours of day and night, pots and kettles, sacks of corn, the babies and the pig riding inside. 'Tis the year 55 all over, and the panicked era just after Braddock's defeat. The smell of a burned cabin grows familiar again, the smell of things that are not supposed to be burned, women's things, house things. Detecting it, if one's approach happens to be from downwind, is ever the first order of business. The stargazers are well away from events. On the 8th of January, 31 miles more or less due west of the southernmost point of Philadelphia, they begin setting up their observatory at John Harlan's farm. "You'll not wreck my vegetable patch," Mrs. Harland informs them. "We are forbidden, good woman, as a term of our contract and commission, to harm gardens and orchards. We'll set up in a safe place. Pay ye fair rent, of course." "Welcome, one and all," cries Mr. Harland. "You fancy the vegetable patch? Why, you shall have it too. We'll buy our vegetables." Playfully swinging at her husband with the spade she holds. "Why here, sirs?" "Because your farm lies exactly as far south from the pole as the southernmost point in Philadelphia," Mason informs them. "'Tis the same latitude, is what you mean. Then so's a great line of farms, east and west. Why choose mine? Why not my neighbour Tumbling's, who has more land than he knows what to do with anyway?" "Exactly 15 miles due south of here," Dixon gently. "We'll want to set up another post. 'Twill mark the 0 point, or beginning of the west line. The point here in your field will tell what its longitude is, as well as the latitude of the south edge of Philadelphia. It ties those two facts together, you see." That wasn't my question. Mr. Tumbling fired his rifle at us, says Dixon. And what made you think I wouldn't? We gambled, suppose Mason and Dixon. I'll just fetch down the rifle, offers Mrs. Harland. Harland is frowning. Wait, why didn't you lads measure south from Philadelphia first, and then come west? Going south first, we should have had to cross the Delaware into New Jersey, Mason explains, and when 'twas time to turn west, 15 miles down, the same river by then become much enlarged, to cross back over it would have presented a task too perilous for the instruments, if not to the lives of the party, all avoided by keeping to dry land, hence first west and then south. And at the end of your last chain, says Mrs. Harland, here we are. She goes off waving her hands in the air, and her husband will be getting an airload soon. Overnight in John Harland's field appears an organized company of men, performing unfamiliar rituals with machinery that may as well have been brought from some other inhabited world. Aye, Dixon agrees. The planet London and its principal moon, nodding at Mason. Greenwich. The farmer can hear them at midnight, when a whisper will carry a mile, as in the daytime, conversing like ship captains through speaking trumpets. Numbers, words that sound like English but make no sense. Of course he starts finding reasons to go back there and look about. He comes upon the astronomers scribbling by beeswax light before a tent pitched beneath a wave-like slope in the earth. A good sledding hill, part field, part woods, this being a region of such mariform grades. They have been bringing the instrument into the meridian. Because of the way the earth spins, Mason explains, the stars travel in arcs upon the sky. When each arrives at the highest point of its arc, so are you, observing it in the instant, looking perfectly northward along your meridian. So the trick would be knowing when it gets to that highest point. And for that we have the equal altitude method. We are waiting just at the moment upon Capella. Have a look. Harland slouches down beneath the eyepiece. Thought this was meant to bring him nearer. The moon, says Dixon, planets, not the stars. Of a star, Mason adds, we wish to know but where it is and when it passes some reference. That's it. Well, of course, one must manipulate the various screw settings precisely, read the nonius, and 100 details besides I'd but bore you with. Seems fairly straightforward. This moves it up and down. Bring Capella to the horizontal wire, suggests Dixon. Hey! Mason in a tone not as vexed as it might be. Who's the certified astronomer here? Child's play, murmurs Mr. Harland, handling the adjusting screws and levers with a respect both Mason and Dixon immediately note. They take the time it crosses the wire rising, and then the time it crosses when setting. The time exactly halfway between is the time it crossed the meridian. This one's not rising. Indeed, tis gone below the line. 'Tis the lens. Everything in the image we see is inverted. The sky turned upside down. Wondrous. You are allowed to do this? We're paid to do it, declares Dixon. Kings pay us to do it, adds Mason. 'Tis like a job where you work standing upon your head, marvels John Harland. He steps back, gazing upward, comparing the creation as seen by the naked eye with its telescopic counterpart. I am unsteady with this. Knowing the time of the culmination, allowing for how fast or slow the clock's going, we might compute the time of the next such culmination, be out there the next night, and upon the tick, turn the instrument down to the horizon, direct an assistant bearing a lanthorn till the flame be bisected by the vertical wire, have him drop a bob line there, and mark the place, and that's north. That's what you're roaring about through those horns all night. Why, what else? Are you looking into futurity? Is that what your neighbours believe? What they hope? Aye. Would that we were. Yet this is when he grows shy of regarding them directly, as if it might be dangerous to risk more than sidelong glances. By February, they have learned their latitude closely enough to know that the sector is set up 356.8 yards south of the parallel that passes through the southernmost point of Philadelphia, putting them about 10.5 seconds of arc off. You'll be needing to move the observatory, I collect, says Mr. Harland. No need to. We'll merely remember to reckon in the offset. In March, a company of axemen, using Polaris to keep their meridian, clear a visto from John Harland's farm 15 miles true south to Alexander Bryant's farm. How can Harland not go along? The wife is less enchanted. John, are you crazy? All this moonbeaming about, and it's past time to be planting. Over at Tumblings they've got it tilled already. You plant it, Betts, Harland replies, and rent out what you don't. This means 5 shillings This means 5 shillings every day I work. Silver, British, real as any spade. You do it. You know how. You do it fine. I've seen you. Just don't put in too many of them damn flowers is all. He will come north again to find she's taken a neat square acre and planted it to sunflowers, soon spread without shame upon the hill slope, a disreputable yellow that people will see for miles. In its re-reflected glow in the corner of the field and back, a newly set chunk of rose quartz is shining strangely. At certain times of the day, the sun will catch the pink grain just right, and you might be transported beneath the sea, under the northern ice. Here is Harland, among the sunflowers, having romantic thoughts for the first time. Betts notices it. He has changed. He has been out running lines, into the distance, when once Brandywine was far enough. And now he wants the West. The meaning of home is therefore changed for them as well, as if their own fields had begun, with tremendous smooth indifference, to move in a swell of possibility. In April, Mason and Dixon, using fir rods and spirit levels, measure exactly the 15 miles southward, allowing for the 10.5 seconds off at the north end. In May, they find their new latitude in Mr. Alexander Bryant's field, then remeasure the line northward again. Think of it, Dixon suggests, as a chainman's version of turning the sector. By June, having found at last the latitude of their east-west line, 39 degrees, 43 feet, 17.4 inches, they are instructed to proceed to the middle point of the peninsula between Chesapeake and the ocean, to begin work upon the tangent line. By the end of the month, they have chained north from the middle point to the banks of the Nanticoke. One reason given for bringing Mason and Dixon into the boundary dispute was that nobody in America seemed to have had any luck with this fiendish problem of the tangent line, which had absorbed the energies of the best geometers in the colonies for more years than would remain to some, their lives to the great cypress swamp a forfeit claimed. Field parties had gone out in 50, 60, and 61, ending up east and west of previous tangent points by as much as 4/10 of a mile. 'Twas infuriating. 'Twas like tickling a fly under its wing pit with a long and wobbly object, such as a fishing pole. The idea was to start from the exact middle of the Delaware Peninsula, defined quite early in the dispute as the middle point, and run a line north till it just touched the arc of a circle of 12 miles radius, centred upon the spire of the courthouse in Newcastle, swung from the shore of Delaware, around counterclockwise westward till it met its tangent line. That's presuming there was a tangent line there to meet it, and so far there wasn't. The problem seemed intractable. From the middle point, you wanted to somehow project a line about 80 miles northward, through swamp and swamp inhabitants that would at the far end just kiss at a single tangent point the 12-mile arc, making a 90-degree angle with the radius drawn from the courthouse spire out to that point. Somebody must have imagined the tangent as some perfect north-south line, some piece of meridian that would pass through the middle point and be exactly 12 miles from Newcastle at the same time. But it couldn't do that and run true north, too. 'Twas more royal geometry, fanciful as ever. Any line from the middle point one wished to end up at tangent to the 12-mile arc would have to be aimed about 3.5 degrees west of true north. Not only did this arc pass too far west, but it also failed to reach far enough north to touch 40 degrees latitude, which was the north boundary of the Baltimore's grant from Charles II, thus making of the lower counties an exclave of Pennsylvania inside Maryland. Yet how could either king have foretold that the younger William Penn might wish the lower counties one day contiguous with upper Pennsylvania? So it was drawn. So was it drawn. Then everyone waited for the astronomers from London to come out and verify the rude colonial's work. For every surveyor who forsook his hearthside in the weeks of chill when the crops were in and the leaves were flown and sights were longer, to go out into the brush and actually set up, out of pure speculation, where there might be a few square inches of dry land, and try to turn the angles and obtain the star shots. Getting in addition snake bit, trapped in sucking mud, lost in fog, frozen to the marrow, harassed by farmers and visited by sheriffs. For every such fieldman there were dozens of enthusiastic amateurs, many of them members of the clergy, who from the comfort of their fires sent the commissioners an unceasing autumn wind full of solutions, which came in upon foolscap and elephant and privately watermarked stock, fluttering in the doors, drifting into corners. You'd have thought it was Fermat's last theorem instead of a county line that looked like a finial upon something of Mr. Chippendale's. Yes, well, of course, that's a question of taste, but look at the way it leans, just enough to be obvious. Honestly, Cedric, it's so predictably colonial, as if, oh, they don't even know how to find north over there. Well, we must send our royal astronomers to tidy things up, mustn't we, sort of thing, when in fact it's once more the dead hand of the second James, who went about granting all this geometrically impossible territory, as unreal in a surveying way as some of the other fictions that governed that unhappy monarch's life. Or, once upon a time, as the Reverend retells it for Bray, there was a magical land called Pennsylvania. In settlement of a debt, it was conveyed to William Penn by the Duke of York, who later became James II, and James had been granted the land by his brother Charles, who at the time was king. To understand their thinking, however, would require access to whatever corner of the Vatican Library houses the heretic section, and therein the concept, spoken of in hushed tones, when at all, of stupiditas regia, or the stupidity of kings. And queens, of course, O alarmed tenebrae, not to mention princesses. Yes, stupidity even afflicts those you would think perfect creatures as well. How so? Tenebrae coolly carrying on with her acufloral meditations. There have, I'm sure, been non-stupid princesses, indeed a good many, uncle. Whereas kings and princes are so stupid, they pretend maps that can't be drawn, and style them Pennsylvania. Picking up a fescue, she leans toward the map upon the wall, recourse to which over the years has settled no one knows how many disputes. King Charles begins at a meridian line somewhere out in the untravelled forests, here, 5 degrees of longitude west of Delaware Bay. Then this not very learned brother finds the point where his desolate meridian crosses the 40th parallel of north latitude. 'Tis of course in a huge blank space on the map, here, at the southwestern and least accessible corner of the grant, where, at this remote intersection of parallel and meridian, is to be anchored the entire scheme. Running eastward from there, the royal brothers expect the 40-degree line somewhere to encounter James's 12-mile arc about Newcastle. Oh, 12 miles ought to do it. We don't want to say 13, because that's so unlucky. 14 would engross for you head of elk, Charles observes, but would push too far west, this vertical line here. The tangent line, sir. I knew that. Charles and James, the Reverend sighing, and their tangle of geometric hope that somehow the arc, the tangent, the meridian, and the west line should all come together at the same perfect point, where, in fact, all is failure. The arc fails to meet the 40-degree north parallel, the tangent fails to be part of any meridian, the west line fails to begin from the tangent point, being 5 miles north of it. Indeed, a spirit of whimsy pervades the entire history of these Delaware boundaries, as if in playful refusal to admit that America, in any way, may be serious. The Calvert agents keep coming up with one fanciful demand after another, either trying to delay and obstruct as long as possible the placing of the markers, or else, someone must suggest, giddy with what they imagine escape into a geometry more permissive than Euclid here in this new world. During the negotiations, Marylanders suggest locating the exact centre of Newcastle by taking a sheet of paper showing a map of the town, trimming round the edges till only the town remains, and then shifting this about upon the point of a pin till it balances, and at that centre of gravity, pricking it through as being the true centre of the town. Yet, if the 12-mile arc be taken as the geometrical expression of the Duke of York's wish to preserve from encroachment his seat of government, then must there project a literal sphere of power from the spire atop the State House, whose intersection with the earth is the arc, unalterably circular, not to be adjusted by so much as a link to agree with any tangent line. Obliged for meetings with the commissioners to sleep in Newcastle a night or two, the surveyors discover the will of the second James at close hand. South, though not far enough, lie the bay and the open sea. Before subsiding to perhaps but a single deep hour of stillness broken by no more than the voices of frogs and the stirring of the salt fens, the sounds dominating the fallen night are the cries of sailors behind the doors of taverns, and the jingling and drone of the music that pleases them. The hypnagogic citizenry lie wondering if these sailors, some of whose ships carry guns, would defend the town, should some Catholic warship, or more than one, advance upon them, torches flaming black and greasy, ejaculations in languages unfathomable. Spanish privateers and Frenchmen too, their hosts are pleased to relate, were used to come up the river, bold as crows, to attack the little villages and plantations. We never felt as secure at night as you in Philadelphia. Any sea-borne assault upon that city would mean first the reduction of Newcastle, for 'tis the key to the river. Now it is difficult to remember, but 15 years ago, in the era of Don Vincent Lopez, there was an apprehensive edge in this town as soon as the sun went down, that did not grow dull till dawn. Though by day the busy capital of the de facto province of Delaware, with nightfall we became a huddled cluster of lights trembling into the coming hours, from lanthorns, candles, and hearths, each an easy target upon the humid shore. Many of us adopted forms of nocturnal behavior more typical of New York, staying up the night through, less out of the desire to transgress than the fear of sleeping any time other than in the daylight hours. The great sceptre atop the courthouse continues in the dark to radiate its mysterious force. The stock are gone to sleep. The fish and the wine were excellent. Rooms fill with tobacco smoke. Insomnia and headaches abound. Cards emerge from cherrywood recesses. Occupants of the houses along the river stir among the lumps in their mattresses, ready at any alarm to wake. Their dreams are of Spanish visitors, who turn out to be unexpectedly jolly, with courtly ways, rolling eyes, passionate guitars, not a homicidal thought in the boatload of 'em. Everyone ends up at an all-night ridotto, with piles of mysterious, delectable Mediterranean food, sandwiches made of entire loaves, stuffed with fried sausages and green peppers, eggplants, tomatoes, cheese melted everywhere, fresh melons mysteriously preserved through the voyage, wines whose grapes are descended from those that supplied Bacchus himself, Newcastle dreams, drooling into and soaking pillows, helpless before the rapacious, festive fleet. How swiftly might the popish scourge descend, another Don Vincente, Havoc's friend, another vile and ring-littered seigneur, another insult to our sovereign shore. Timothy Tox, Pennsylvaniad. Through July, they continue north, through swamps, snakes, god-awful humidity, thunder gusts at night, trees so thick that even with 30 axemen each chain's length seems one with labour incommensurate, waking each glaucous dawn into sweat and stillness, to struggle another day, with no confidence that at the correct distance they will pass anywhere near the tangent point, much less touch it exactly. On paper, the tangent line's inclination reminds Dixon of the road between Catterick and Binchester. In fact, on up to Lanchester, though one had to look for it. Part of the Roman's Great North Road. To amuse himself in his less mindful moments, he would travel out to the old Roman ruins above the weir, and sight southward, down the middle of the road, for it ran straight ahead as a shot. Nothing so clear or easy as that in Delaware, however. Dixon mutters to himself all shift long. If we set up over there, then this great bloody tree's in the way, yet if we wish to be clear of the tree for any sight longer than arm's length, we must stand in glower of uncertain depth, looking withal from light into shadow. I appreciate it, says Mason, when you share your innermost thought processes with me in this way, almost as if, strangely, you did not trust me. After these months, who would? In August, they finally go chaining past the 81-mile mark, which they figure puts them a little beyond the tangent point, wherever it is, back there. They take September, October, and November to find it, as nicely as art may achieve, computing offsets and measuring them, improving the tangent line by small tweaks and smoothings, until they can report at last that the 90-degree angle required between the tangent line and the 12-mile radius from the courthouse to the tangent point is as perfect as they can get it, which means, as it will prove, off by 2 feet and 2 inches, more or less. In December, they discharge the hands and pause for the winter, at Harlan's, at Brandywine. To a good year's work, Dixon raising a pewter can of new cider, and pray for another. To repetition and routine, from here to the end of it, Mason gesturing reluctantly with his claret glass. Even so, more festive than he's been for a while. Routine? Not likely. Not upon the west line. Who knows what'll be out there? Each day impossible to predict. Pure adventure. Thank ye, Dixon. A comfort as ever. Yes, the total blindness in which we must enter that desert might easily have slipped my mind, allowing me a few pitiable seconds' respite from the thoughts of it. How welcome! Alas, 'twas not to be, was it? At least nowhere in range of your voice. Dear. Imagined I'd been taking rather the jolliest of tones, actually. My, how awkward for you. Another holiday flare-up of many preceding, which at first had sent Harlands of all ages cringing against walls or scrambling up the ladder, yet soon subsided to but one more sound of untamed nature to be grown used to out here. Like thunder, or certain animal mimicries at night from across a creek. Each time the surveyors apologise for their behaviour, then presently are screaming again. Apologise, scream, apologise, scream. Daily life in the Harland house grows jagged. After a Christmastide truce, with the rest of the winter waiting them, perhaps more of it than any can imagine themselves surviving without at least one serious lapse in behaviour, the surveyors decide to travel to Lancaster, perhaps in hopes that the imps of discord will fail to pursue them across Susquehanna. End of chapter.